Kara stood at the edge of Nocturne, the underground city she had called home her entire life. The vast metallic structures and dimly lit tunnels had always felt like a cage to her. No one in Nocturne dared to speak of the surface world. It was forbidden, shrouded in mystery and fear. But Kara wasn't like the others. The stories of the surface, though filled with danger, had always intrigued her. Finn approached her quietly, his footsteps barely audible on the cold metal floor. "Kara, are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "If we get caught, it's not just exile we'll face. They'll make an example out of us." Kara turned to face him, her expression resolute. "We have to know, Finn. We can't just accept what they tell us. What if the surface isn't what they say it is? What if there's more to the world than this?" she said, her voice filled with determination. Finn hesitated, but the fire in Kara's eyes was contagious. He nodded slowly. "All right. But we need to be careful. The enforcers are everywhere, and they're ruthless." Kara smiled faintly, a mix of excitement and fear dancing in her chest. "We'll be fine. We just need to stick to the plan." They moved quickly through the narrow alleys of Nocturne, avoiding the watchful eyes of the enforcers. Kara led Finn to an old abandoned section of the city. It was a place few dared to go, believed to be unstable and dangerous. But Kara had found something here, a hidden passage that she believed led to the surface. "This is it," she whispered, pulling aside a rusted metal grate to reveal a dark winding tunnel. "This is our way out." Finn peered into the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest. "How did you find this?" he asked, both impressed and terrified. "I've been exploring for years, trying to find a way up," Kara admitted. "I knew there had to be something. And this feels right." With one last look at each other, they stepped into the tunnel. The air was damp and musty, and the walls seemed to close in around them as they descended deeper into the unknown. But Kara's resolve never wavered. She could feel it in her bones. They were on the brink of discovering something incredible. After what felt like hours, they reached the end of the tunnel. A heavy rusted door stood before them, its surface covered in ancient, unreadable symbols. Kara pressed her ear against it, listening for any signs of life beyond. Hearing nothing, she turned the handle, and the door creaked open with a groan. Blinding light flooded the tunnel, and Kara and Finn shielded their eyes as they stepped into the world above. When their eyes adjusted, what they saw left them speechless. The surface was nothing like the dark, oppressive world they had known. The sky stretched endlessly above them, a brilliant blue with streaks of orange from the setting sun. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of earth and vegetation, a stark contrast to the sterile metallic scent of Nocturne. But the world was not untouched by the disaster that had driven humanity underground. Ruins of buildings stood as silent witnesses to a past civilization, their structures overrun by nature. Vines crawled up the sides of skyscrapers, and trees grew through the cracks in the pavement. Finn took a shaky breath. "It's beautiful," he whispered, awestruck. Kara nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of wonder and sadness. "This is what they've been hiding from us," she said softly. "They didn't want us to know that the surface could still be alive." As they ventured further into the ruins, they stumbled upon something unexpected, a small, functioning garden. It was a patch of green amidst the gray, meticulously tended to, with vegetables growing in neat rows. Finn knelt down, touching the leaves gently. "Someone's been here," he said, his voice filled with curiosity. Kara looked around, her mind racing. If someone's been here, then maybe we're not alone. Maybe there are others who survived, or who never went underground. Just as they began to explore the area, a loud noise echoed through the ruins. The ground beneath them shook, and they heard the unmistakable sound of machinery coming to life. "We need to hide," Kara urged, pulling Finn behind a crumbling wall. They watched in silence as a group of armored figures marched into the clearing. These weren't enforcers. They were something else, something more advanced. Their armor gleamed in the sunlight, and they moved with a purpose that sent a chill down Kara's spine. "Who are they?" Finn whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," Kara replied, her eyes narrowing as she studied the newcomers. "But they're not here by accident." The armored figures began inspecting the garden, communicating with each other in a language neither Kara nor Finn recognized. One of them pulled out a device and started scanning the area, the device emitting a faint, eerie glow. Kara's heart raced. "We need to get out of here now," she hissed, pulling Finn away from the wall and leading him back towards the tunnel. But as they turned to leave, One of the figures looked up, its visor locking onto their position. Kara's breath caught in her throat as the figure raised a hand, signaling the others. They had been spotted. Run! Kara shouted, grabbing Finn's hand and sprinting towards the tunnel. The figures moved quickly, their footsteps heavy and deliberate as they gave chase. Kara and Finn pushed their legs to the limit, the tunnel entrance growing closer with each step. But just as they were about to reach it, a blinding light surrounded them, and they were lifted off the ground. Kara struggled against the invisible force holding them in place, but it was no use. The figures approached them, their faces hidden behind opaque visors. Kara's mind raced, searching for a way out, but all she could think of was the fear that gripped her heart. Finn looked at her, his eyes wide with terror. "Kara, what do we do?" he asked, his voice shaking. Kara took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "We don't give up. We find out who they are and what they want. And we fight if we have to," she said, her voice steady. As the figures closed in, Kara knew one thing for sure: their journey had only just begun. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, and they would uncover the truth behind the surface world, even if it meant challenging everything they had ever known. Kara and Finn were thrust into a small, dimly lit room. The door behind them slammed shut with a heavy thud, leaving them in silence. The walls were made of cold, smooth metal, and the only light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows across the floor. "Where are we?" Finn whispered, his voice trembling as he scanned the room. Kara didn't respond immediately. She was too busy trying to make sense of their situation. Whoever had captured them wasn't part of the government. Their technology was far more advanced. The figures that had surrounded them were unlike anything she had ever seen in Nocturne. Before she could say anything, the door creaked open again. A tall figure entered the room, this time without armor. He had a commanding presence, with piercing eyes that seemed to look straight through them. He wore a dark uniform with no visible insignia, but his aura of authority was undeniable. "My name is Draven," he said, his voice deep and calm. "You must be Kara and Finn." Kara took a step forward, trying to hide her fear. "How do you know our names? And why did you bring us here?" she demanded. Draven smiled faintly. "We've been watching you for a long time. You two are among the few who have dared to question the lies your government has been feeding you. That's why we brought you here, to join us." "Join you?" Finn asked, confused. "Who are you?" "We are the Resistance," Draven explained. "A group of survivors who never went underground. We've been living on the surface, fighting to reclaim the world that was taken from us. The government, you know, is a lie. They've kept your people in the dark, controlled by fear and manipulation. But there's more to the world than the underground cities." Kara's mind raced. She had always suspected that there was more to the surface, but hearing it confirmed was both exhilarating and terrifying. "If what you're saying is true, why haven't you tried to free everyone before?" she asked. Draven's expression darkened. "It's not that simple. The government's control is deeply rooted, and they have powerful technology at their disposal. We've been gathering our forces, but we can't do it alone. We need people like you, people who are brave enough to question the lies and strong enough to fight for the truth." Kara and Finn exchanged a look. They had wanted to escape Nocturne to see the surface, but they hadn't anticipated becoming part of a larger struggle. "What do you want us to do?" Kara asked cautiously. Draven nodded, as if he had expected the question. "We need you to help us spread the truth. To show the people of Nocturne that the surface isn't the wasteland they've been led to believe. But we also need to dismantle the government's control. There are key facilities that, if taken out, would weaken their grip on power. We believe you can help us with that." Finn swallowed hard, trying to process everything. "You want us to go back to Nocturne? To fight the government from the inside?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Exactly," Draven confirmed. "You know the city better than we do. You can move through it unnoticed, gather information, and recruit others who are willing to fight. But be warned, this won't be easy. The government won't hesitate to crush anyone who opposes them." Kara felt a surge of determination. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, a chance to do something meaningful, to fight for the truth. "We'll do it," she said firmly. "We'll help you." Finn hesitated for a moment, but then nodded in agreement. "We're in. But how do we know we can trust you?" he asked, still wary. Draven's eyes softened slightly. "You don't have to trust me. Trust your instincts. Trust what you've seen with your own eyes. The surface is real, and so is the fight for freedom. But the choice is yours. You can walk away now, or you can join us and make a difference. Kara looked at Finn, then back at Draven. We're not walking away, she said resolutely. We've come this far, and we're not going back to the lies. Draven smiled, a rare expression of approval. Good. We'll start your training immediately. There's much you need to learn before we send you back to Nocturne. The fight for freedom is just beginning, and you two are now part of it. As they left the room, Kara felt a mixture of fear and excitement. They were stepping into a world of danger and uncertainty, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. The lies of Nocturne were starting to unravel, and she was determined to see the truth fully revealed, no matter the cost. Kara and Finn, now fully trained and equipped by the Resistance, found themselves back in the dark, winding tunnels of Nocturne. The city felt different to them now, not just a place of confinement, but a battleground where they would fight for the truth. They knew the risks, but they also knew they had to do this. The people of Nocturne deserved to know the truth about the surface and the lies they had been fed for so long. Their mission was clear: sabotage the government's key facilities to disrupt their control and spread the message of the Resistance. It was a dangerous plan, but Kara and Finn were ready. They moved through the shadows, their hearts pounding as they approached the first target, a communication hub that kept the citizens of Nocturne in the dark. Kara glanced at Finn, who gave her a reassuring nod. They had planned every step, but there was no room for error. She took a deep breath and whispered, "This is it. We have to be quick and silent." Finn nodded again, his face set with determination. "Let's do this," he replied, his voice steady. They slipped inside the hub, avoiding the guards with practiced precision. The facility was filled with screens and terminals, all displaying the government's propaganda. Kara felt a surge of anger as she looked at the lies being fed to the people, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Finn quickly got to work, placing the explosives they had been given by the Resistance. Kara kept watch, her eyes darting around the room, ready for any sign of danger. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. Kara's heart leaped into her throat. "Hurry, Finn," she whispered urgently. "I'm almost done," he replied, his fingers moving swiftly over the wires. The footsteps grew louder, and Kara tightened her grip on the small weapon they had been given. She wasn't sure if they could take on the guards in a direct fight, but she was ready to do whatever it took. Finally, Finn finished setting the explosives. "Done," he said, standing up and quickly moving toward Kara. They dashed out of the room just as the guards entered, narrowly avoiding detection. Kara's pulse raced as they made their way to the exit. "We did it," she breathed, a mix of relief and tension in her voice. But their success was short-lived. As they reached the outer corridors, an alarm blared through the facility. "They've found the explosives," Finn exclaimed, his eyes wide with fear. "Run!" Kara shouted, grabbing his hand as they sprinted down the tunnel. The alarm echoed through the city, a piercing wail that would soon bring the enforcers down on them. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly before them, but they kept running, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The sound of pursuit grew closer, the enforcers hot on their trail. Kara's mind raced, trying to find a way out. Just as they reached a fork in the tunnel, a group of enforcers appeared in front of them, blocking their path. Kara skidded to a halt, pulling Finn back. They were trapped. The lead enforcer stepped forward, his face hidden behind a mask. "You're under arrest for treason against the state," he declared, his voice cold and authoritative. "Surrender now, and your punishment will be swift. Resist, and you'll be made an example." Kara's mind whirled. There was no way out. They were outnumbered and outgunned. But surrender wasn't an option. Not after everything they had learned. Not after all they had fought for. She tightened her grip on Finn's hand, her eyes locking with his. "We can't give up," she whispered fiercely. "We have to keep fighting." Finn nodded, his jaw clenched. "I'm with you, Kara. Whatever happens, we face it together." Before the enforcers could react, Kara and Finn turned and ran in the opposite direction, toward the section of Nocturne that was old and unstable. The enforcers hesitated for a moment, then gave chase. The tunnels here were narrower and more treacherous. Kara and Finn ducked and weaved through the crumbling passageways, their lungs burning from exertion. The The sounds of pursuit were still close behind, but they couldn't stop now. As they rounded a corner, Kara spotted a small opening in the wall, a maintenance shaft that hadn't been used in years. "In here," she called, pulling Finn toward it. They squeezed through the narrow opening, just as the enforcers rounded the corner. Kara's heart pounded as they crawled through the dark, claustrophobic space. The shaft was tight, barely wide enough for them to move, but it offered a temporary escape. Finally, they emerged into a large, abandoned chamber. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in rust and decay. But for the moment, they were safe. Kara collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving. "We need to keep moving," she said, her voice hoarse. "We can't let them catch us." Finn nodded, though he looked as exhausted as she felt. "We have to find another way out of here. The whole city will be on high alert now." Kara's mind raced, trying to figure out their next move. The mission was far from over, and the resistance was counting on them. "We need to reach the other cells," she said finally. "If we can regroup, we might still have a chance." But before they could move, the ground beneath them shook violently. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, and the walls began to crack. "They found us," Finn said, his voice tinged with panic. "They're bringing the whole place down." Kara's eyes widened as the ceiling started to collapse. "We have to go now," she shouted, grabbing Finn and pulling him toward the far side of the chamber. They ran as the ceiling caved in behind them, debris crashing to the ground. Kara's heart raced, adrenaline surging through her veins. There was no time to think, only to act. They reached another tunnel just as the chamber collapsed entirely, dust and rubble filling the air. Kara coughed, her lungs burning, but she didn't stop. They had to keep going, to survive. Finally, they reached a section of the tunnel that seemed stable. Kara leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. "We made it," she gasped, looking at Finn. He nodded, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. But for how long? Kara didn't have an answer. They were deep in enemy territory, and their mission had just become infinitely more dangerous. But she knew one thing, they couldn't turn back now. "We keep fighting," she said, her voice firm. "For Nocturne, for the resistance, for the truth. We don't stop until the city is free." Finn looked at her, determination in his eyes. "Together," he said. "Together," Kara agreed. And with that, they pushed forward, deeper into the darkness, knowing that the fight for freedom had only just begun. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, see you in the next story.